There were a lot of things that got unpacked in episode 2 of the New York Giants offseason Hard Knocks series, and we got to break it down on today's video. But I'm curious, are you enjoying Hard Knocks? Do you like getting the peek behind the curtain of the things that unfolded this offseason? Or are you just kind of over it? Let me know. Hit that thumbs up icon if you're enjoying it. Welcome into New York Giants Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Marshall Green. Let's dive into it. My number one takeaway from Hard Knocks episode 2 is somebody is lying. Somebody is lying, whether it be Joe Schoen or Saquon Barkley, about there being a contract or no contract offered to Barkley. The way I understood it was when Joe Schoen called up Saquon Barkley on franchise tag deadline day, and he said, we're going to let you hit the open market as long as you come back to us with the offers you get and give us a chance to match it. While that is not a contract offer, that is something. On the other hand, there was no physical or verbal offer made by the Giants prior to free agency. But there also, I've heard multiple people say, there were not offers exchanged. That means Saquon didn't really, I know the player doesn't offer a team an offer, but you can exchange offers, and it sounds like that didn't happen either. I do want to talk about this right here. A preview for episode 3 obviously aired at the end of episode 2, and Joe Schoen was on the phone, pictured right here, and he's asking somebody. I don't know who he's on the phone with. If I had to guess, it would be the agent of Saquon Barkley. They talked on the phone in episode 2. I assume they're doing it right here as well, because Joe Schoen said, if I offered Saquon Barkley a 3-year deal worth $12.5 APY with $25 million guarantee, would he be a New York Giant? He's not asking his mother that. He's not asking Brian Daboll that. He's obviously asking someone that represents Saquon Barkley. And to me, that sounds a little bit like an offer. You're probably asking his agent, if I offered him XYZ, would he sign it? We're going to find out in episode 3, though, if there was ever any sort of exchanging of contracts between the two parties. Look, the Giants had multiple needs: quarterback, receiver, offensive line, edge rusher, and corner, that are all more important to building a successful football team. They were just bigger priorities, and both sides were fed up. Joe Schoen was ready to move on, and Saquon Barkley can say that whole I wanted to be a Giant. That didn't sound like a guy that was dying to be a Giant on the phone when Joe Schoen called him. Yeah, man, I already told you where I want to be. All right. The happiest part of the conversation is when Saquon heard he's going to be a free agent. I wouldn't even be surprised if he already knew where he was going to sign at this point. Who do you think's more to blame for this messy breakup? I would say Joe Schoen, because he didn't want Saquon here. He made the ultimate decision to not re-sign Barkley. So I'll blame him for the messy breakup, but I think it was just time. It was two people and two parties that needed to go their separate ways, and both, I believe, are going to benefit from it. I would say Schoen, but I don't blame him at all for how the situation unfolded. To a little bit more fun of a talking point of that episode. For all the people that told me after video after video after video where I told you that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, their guy is Drake Maye, I hope you watched episode 2 because it was clear as day that Drake Maye was the Giants guy. First off, Joe Schoen at the NFL Combine told Brandon Brown, the assistant general manager for the Giants, hey, I'm going to go plant the seed with the New England Patriots. I'm going to let them know that if they are going to trade the number 3 pick, to call me. So are we sure the Giants weren't interested in trading up? What about when the New York Giants attended 6 North Carolina football games this past fall? I guess that didn't mean anything either. What about the interaction with Brian Daboll and Drake Maye on the whiteboard, where Brian Daboll looked like a fat kid about to get an ice cream cone? He was so happy talking to Drake Maye. He did. He was salivating at the mouth like, Mamma Mia, that's my guy. It was. Drake Maye was clearly the top priority for Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, and the New York Football Giants in the 2024 NFL Draft. They wanted to trade up for 3. They told us that in episode 2. And all of the quarterback interviews that went down, none were as juicy as Drake Maye, and nobody had their ears perked up like Brian Daboll did when talking to Maye compared to the other quarterbacks that they talked with. I think it's also important to know the Giants did their homework on all the top QBs. They had a press combine interview with Drake Maye, Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, and Jaden Daniels. So to act like, which I don't think there's people out there like this anymore, but I know they will be in this comments, the Giants wanted a quarterback. They just couldn't move up to go get one. I also thought it was interesting. We've kind of saw it in episode 1, a little peek behind the curtain, but I think it was just shown and thrown in our faces in episode 2. Christian Wilkins, the Giants were going to sign him in NFL free agency if they did not make that move for Brian Burns. We heard in episode 1, the pro scouting department talked about Wilkins. Then we also heard Joe Schoen and Brandon Brown talking about Wilkins. This was their top free agent target if they weren't able to make that trade for Brian Burns, which they eventually did. Another thing that I noticed in the first 2 episodes is Assistant General Manager Brandon Brown, he is not a Daniel Jones guy. He does not believe in Daniel Jones. Go watch again. I've watched each episode 2 times, and I watched the first one almost 3 times, and I got busy during that third watch. But every time that Joe Schoen talks to Brown about Daniel Jones, his facial reaction, the way he's looking, he's like, we're going to let Saquon Barkley go and run it back with Daniel. He doesn't believe in him. He doesn't. And you know what? I don't think he's wrong for not believing in him. I think it's pretty apparent that Brandon Brown, not a Daniel Jones fan. Another thing, when Joe Schoen speaks to the media, it is calculated. He does not say anything without having a purpose for what he said. I loved the part where he met with the people of the Giants PR team, and they did a practice run, and I'm sure every organization does this, a practice run of the questions that Schoen was going to be asked at the NFL Scouting Combine. And I thought it was pretty damn funny when the PR guy asked him about Saquon Barkley, and Joe Schoen goes, I tried to pay him a whole lot of money last year, but he didn't want to take it. And the PR guy goes, I don't know if you should say that. So that was pretty funny. But he talked about wanting to draft all positions. He said, I told the media that that the franchise tag was on the table for Saquon Barkley, even though we never had any intent of franchise tagging him. So always take what Joe Schoen says with a grain of salt. And I think sometimes you could take what he says and parlay that into a belief that you have. Because, man, this guy is calculating. He speaks on everything for a reason. Brian Daboll, quarterback guy, quarterback guru. The things he did in those those meetings at the draft combine with Williams, with with Caleb Williams, with Drake Maye, with Jaden Daniels and J.J. McCarthy, you could tell that Brian Daboll is a guy that wants to work with a young quarterback, and he can connect with these players. He's extremely gifted and talented and smart up here when it comes to the X's and O's of the quarterback position, and he loved Drake Maye. That was pretty damn apparent. Also, Brian Daboll loved Malik Nabers. What about when they go to interview Malik Nabers at the Combine and he goes, yo, that kid, Nabers from LSU, love that kid. I've been watching his tape all day long. Did you not watch his tape before the Combine, Brian? That was one of my first thoughts. But clearly, Daboll loved Malik Nabers, the competitive spirit, the never say die. The question he asked him, how do you deal with losing? Nabers said, not well. How do you deal with not getting the ball early on in the game? He said, hard. And Brian Daboll said, I love both of those things. But what stuck out to me was when the Giants interviewed Rome Odunze, and Rome Odunze was talked about by the New York Giants, it seemed like Joe Schoen was really interested. I'm not going to say Joe Schoen wanted Rome Odunze over Nabers, but I bet there was a conversation that Joe Schoen was pushing for Rome over Nabers at some point, but inevitably it became Nabers as the pick for number 6. Also, Joe Schoen is not sold on the cornerbacks on this team. And once again, I found myself getting pissed off during Hard Knocks. And maybe I just care too much. Maybe I just care. But it pissed me off when Joe Schoen is talking about trading for Brian Burns, and he looks at the other people in the front office and goes, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns. Hell, even I could play cornerback on this team. 1, no the hell you couldn't. And 2, go find somebody that can cover somebody. Because I don't want to see Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and CeeDee Lamb dancing in the end zone week after week when we play these teams. I get it. It was lighthearted. It was a little bit of a joke. But there's always a little bit of shred of a truth in a joke. And while he's not sold on that, he also kind of believes that if we got a great pass rush, we don't need great corners. And I think that's one of the bigger myths in the NFL. Episode 3, though, that might be the best one yet. We're going to get to see the full Brian Burns trade. He was talking on the phone with the general manager, I believe his name is Dan Morgan, of the Carolina Panthers. Like, Dan, Why do I got to add a 7th-round pick? We got to get players too. And the fact they're best friends made it really good. We're going to finally wrap up this Saquon Barkley drama, and we're going to see the NFL draft and NFL free agency. I believe there's 5 episodes, so we're at about the halfway point. I've been loving it. I love the inside access that we're getting to these things. I also didn't love, and maybe I'm also reading into it too much, I didn't love Brian Daboll while they're running 40s talking about, I can run under a 7 flat, and they're all joking and stuff. Can we focus up? We just won fucking 6 football games. Can we pay a little bit more attention? Can we give a little bit more of a I don't know. That's just me being the pessimistic Giants fan that I am. I loved it. I love this stuff. And I will say, after 2 episodes, I still have ultimate faith in Joe Schoen. I do. I don't think he mishandled the Saquon Barkley situation at all. Look, it just wasn't going to work. Giants won 6 games last year, and they had major holes to fill at premium positions. They couldn't afford a $12 million running back. It is what it is. Can't wait for episode 3. We'll break it down next week. Subscribe, hit that thumbs up icon. Be a real one.